All right, folks, this is Kyle Hunt, the host of Remodelers on the Rise, perhaps your favorite podcast in all of the internet. I don't know. And I have a new friend who I just met approximately 10 minutes ago. Just so everybody knows, here's how this sometimes goes down. Sometimes I have guests who I know personally, have worked with, or colleagues. Other times, we may have a guest where I say, you know what, I think that person has some valuable insight and information that would be helpful to their fellow remodelers. And what that ends up looking like is some emails back and forth. And then, hey, dial in 10 minutes before we start this, and we'll kind of just make sure we're feeling good. And that's where Jeff Covert with Rylynn Remodeling falls. And right before we start, I said, Jeff, do you have any other questions? He goes, oh, I can always talk, no problem. You're just ready to go.
Except when we're live.
Except when we're live. Now all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, we're live now. I'm freaking out. Kyle, no, I got a feeling that my friend Jeff is going to do just fine and dandy. Jeff, could you? And let me preface it one more way. Jeff is in Remodelers Community. If you go to remodelerscommunity.com, that's our free private Facebook group that just has consistent, good conversation and helping going on. And I think I saw, Jeff, your name a couple times, but in particular, Jeff spoke related to recruiting and that side of things. And he wrote in there, I've spent some time as the director of recruiting, and that jumped out at me. When I think of my remodelers community, when I think of my remodeling clients, the need to always be recruiting, the need for strong retention of our team, that is a topic that is important in 2022. It's going to be important every year going forward. So that's kind of how I have Jeff here today. And the topic that we're digging into, the title says recruiting starts with retention. And we're going to start there and kind of unpack it. But Jeff, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell the people a little bit of your backstory and what you're up to these days.
All right. So I've basically been in the residential construction remodeling industry basically since I was born. There's pictures of me at 3 years old on a dozer working a T-handle. And then in college,
I mean, it's a little bit child labor there. I mean, 3.
Yeah, I sat on the corner and worked the blade.
All right, rock and roll.
So in college, I worked at Lowe's. Tried about 6 months out of the industry and tried insurance, and that was not for me. And then I worked for one of the nation's largest remodelers, and then the largest bathroom remodeler, one of the franchises. And from there, I did marketing for most of the time, and then a portion of the time did the director recruiting, and then a short little bit sales manager. After that, went and sold for a distributor rep selling building materials. I'd got my license. I wanted to start my own thing. Was trying a few jobs on the side. I realized that really there wasn't a whole lot of time, but then COVID hit. That company parked us, and we became telemarketers, and I can't do that. No. So I just went full on, and now here I am a couple years later, and we have 10 guys, and we run 4 to 5 jobs at a time.
Woo! You kind of got this up and running quickly.
A little bit. I was used to it.
Starting your business after that, history in the industry, and started up Rylynn Remodeling, which, by the way, Ryan is his middle name. His wife's middle name is Lynn. Their daughter's middle name is Rylynn. Boom! Now you know why it's called Rylynn Remodeling. I remember that correctly, right?
You did. Good job.
All right. Rock and roll. So within that time frame, you've got 10 people working for you and doing just general remodeling work, kitchens, baths, additions, that type of thing.
We specialize in interior, and then outdoor living spaces. So that's an arena around here that not a lot of people are in, and we've sort of found our niche there along with the interior.
Gotcha. And Jeff's in West Virginia. Now you know everything you need to know about Jeff. All right. So recruiting starts with retention. Recruiting starts with retention. What are we talking about with recruiting? We're talking about building our team. We're talking about the need to continually be adding or replacing people on our team. And as we were going back and forth on this, you were talking about this particular topic. Recruiting starts with retention. Teach us a little bit about that. What do you have to say?
So, if you're always losing people, then you're going to have to recruit a whole lot more than if you do keep those people. Now, I say that, and then I'll backtrack, because sometimes you'll hear me say that you have to push someone out. Well, sometimes you do have that bad apple that will really cause more retention than what they're worth, even though they might be a great employee, a skilled person, but they might be, talking to someone, they might be running their mouth about something, this and that, other people, and causing tension that really is going to push other people away that are truly good.
Yeah, I'm going to ask more about that because that's something that we need to unpack. But I also updated the slide that shows up. Recruiting starts with retention of the good team members.
Yeah,
How's that?
that's right. That's right.
So, so talk about what does that look like, and how do we do that?
So it doesn't always, when you think of retention, first thing a lot of people think of is, oh, I got to give people raises, and it's really not. I've got several guys that have came from other companies. I'm not one that screams, cusses, and shoos the guys out. Nobody likes that. Whether, no matter how old you are, you just don't like that. And I've got some guys that have came to us because that's the way they were getting treated. I mean, they were being treated just poorly, and whether they showed up or not, it never changed. So, first you just got to treat your people right. Do unto others, and that's the way you got to treat your people.
So hold that next thought. So what that means is you actually, hey people, you might have to look in the mirror a little bit and have some self-awareness to make sure that your stress or your frustration is not a constant boom, boom, boom. Sometimes, and it's not a perfect analogy, but oftentimes how we parent children and how we manage our employees have a lot of correlation between it. Quote unquote from 16-year-old Thomas Hunt a few months ago. Guys, it just seems like 90% of what you have to talk to me about is how I'm not doing this, or I need to do that, or I'm screwing this up. It just seems like everything's always negative. Now, when we heard that, we at first were like, well, that's because you're being a knucklehead, so stop it. But the statement was true, and we were pretty much oblivious to it, unaware of it. Nah, that's an unfair percentage, but it was pretty accurate. And I think sometimes our frustration, or we get in a bad groove or a bad routine, and too much of our communication is just focused on what's not going well and what they need to improve. And that can very easily happen with your team, especially if you're busy and there's a lot going on. So what Jeff first said there of recruiting starts with retention, make sure you're treating them well. Each one of us has improvement to be made there. What are some other ideas that come to mind on this one?
So some of the other things that we do, my business partner, he used to own restaurants. He loves to cook. So one thing that we do each month is he will cook lunch for the guys. We have an oven in our shop, and he'll cook lunch for the guys, and he'll either have it ready in the morning for them to take, or they'll come back and eat here. We try to get together outside of work. Quite a bit, actually. We've all became very good friends, but I think just building that team, because if everybody gets along and everybody enjoys being with the others, then it makes the job way easier. And not always, if you're looking at taking a sports analogy, not always the best athletes win the game. It's the best team that wins. And I think as an owner, manager, whatever, you have to make sure that you're putting together that team. And when I'm interviewing people, I sometimes will pass up someone who is a little more skilled that I just don't think will fit in with everybody, because then it will create that negativity in the group. So that's a big thing there. Don't bring that person in that's going to mess.
Give an example. Does a story come to mind, or does a person come to mind, or unpack that a little bit more? It's important.
I mean, there's been many instances where I've had someone that I'm like, they're probably really skilled, but their personality just didn't fit with the rest of the group. And when you have that, it will really just drive a wedge in between some people.
Interesting. And then have a few of those people slip through the initial interviews and kind of gotten into the team.
of
Yeah.
course. And when they do, take action quickly. Make sure that you are aware enough of what's going on that you can push that person out, and maybe not push them out initially, but at least get them with someone who that they're not going to run off. Because if you're putting
Mm,
someone that's brand new with someone that's maybe has that personality that they can go along with different people's personality, then they're going to drag that person along with it. So it's
I, I've heard way too many stories of folks who have a not great team member. Could be the skill. Oftentimes, it's more their attitude and how they communicate, and just their negative demeanor.
yeah,
And I could just list example after example of a really solid, great fit, good company fit, culture fit, that person finally getting fed up enough that says, all right, if you're not going to hear what we're saying, if you're not going to make the hard change that needs to happen, I'm out. And they leave. And what you're reminding us here, and what you're emphasizing here, and you said your job is to make sure you're putting together that team that gels. You're consistently, what does it mean to be a good leader of your team? What does it mean to be a good manager of your company? You are paying close attention to how those personalities are interacting. You're making little adjustments. You're dialing in a little bit more. You realize when you need to take somebody and set them aside and have a conversation. You don't let that belittling or that feistiness with each other that's gone too far just continue on and ignore it. It'll get better. You may sit down with the two of them and discuss it. You pay close attention to how that interaction is happening. And when you see somebody that's really not a good fit, and you see employee morale declining, you take action on it. And a lot of people need to be reminded of that. That is a scary thing to do. That is a hard thing to do, but it's a very important thing to do.
right, absolutely. And there's been one thing that has, we'll talk about the bottom person, but when I say the bottom person, that can be the person with the worst attitude. Also, it doesn't. When I say that, it doesn't
Absolutely.
have to be the actual bottom person in terms of skill. But if
Yeah.
you do have that bottom person, you always have to push them out. And then in your mind, or a lot of people's mind, you think, okay, well, I've got that bottom person out. Well, there's always going to be a bottom person. So if you're always recruiting to push that bottom person up or out, then you're always going to push your top higher. So pushing your top higher always starts with your bottom.
Hmm. That's good. And what do you guys do outside of work that you guys seem to enjoy?
There's several of them that I think they play some video game every night. I don't
Oh
do
my.
that, but they do that I think almost every night. But football games, we we're in a small community, so a lot of times we'll see the other person out eating, and we'll just eat together. So just really whatever. It's we're a small community, and
Hmm.
we run across each other all the time outside of work, and then we plan stuff too. We always, of
Hmm.
course, have a Christmas party, and then we try to plan something else throughout the year just to bring everybody together.
And I would agree that it doesn't always come down to just what you're paying them, but have there been, as far as retention goes, are there some benefits, or there's some things that you have in place that also ties in with your retention plan?
Um, so after a year, then they do get weeks paid vacation, and then after a year, they get all holidays paid. We don't work any holidays, and then we very rarely work Saturdays. And I will never require anybody, and I will never want anybody to work a
Gotcha.
Sunday. So
Good.
they have to have their time
Sure.
for family as
Sure.
well.
All right. So I had several takeaways there. As people are watching live, if you have a question or a comment, please type it in there, or a little like for those of you watching live. But I heard some good reminders related to retention, to be really paying close attention to the dynamic amongst the team, to really be paying close attention to the culture and the feel and the vibe that you're wanting your team to have. Moving from that into more of the recruiting, not necessarily retention, but the recruiting. How do we approach recruiting. The phrase that you had written in the email was recruiting from a position of power, not desperation. Maybe hearkening back to your days as a director of recruiter, talking about that or talking about what you're currently doing. Tell us a little bit about your approach or your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So a lot of times people will wait until someone quits or someone, gets injured, sick, whatever it may be. People will wait until that happens and not really have that bench to back it up. So if you don't have the bench, or if you're not aware of what's going on and someone does just all of a sudden quit, or you have to fire someone for some reason, then if you haven't been recruiting, then you're definitely recruiting from a position that you have to, not a position of power. So when you recruit from a position of power, you're always going to have someone that you can fill in if that person goes along. Now, if you're recruiting out of desperation, then you're never going to get rid of someone that is down at the bottom, and someone at the bottom is going to have to move into that top group or lead some of your jobs or do things that you probably wouldn't have them do before. And then that's when you really start getting in trouble, because maybe the person doesn't have the experience to do that, and you're throwing them in there, and then something happens on the job and you look back and say, hey, I probably shouldn't have done that. But
and when you say getting in trouble, you before we started the recording, you mentioned this of, getting in trouble, or that's where your problems really start to happen. That's where the phone calls, that's where the mistakes, that's where the costly mistakes, realizing there's this truth of the stronger your team is, the stronger your remodeling business is. Folks, it is not, do processes and systems and checklists make an impact on how smoothly things run? Absolutely. It is a small percentage compared to the quality of your team.
Right.
Correct. Okay. So as you're moving, especially if you're moving kind of the bottom tier person up because out of necessity, that can be a problem. So always be recruiting, and you're using this phrase of having a little bit of a bench. What does that look like? That means we're talking to folks and interviewing folks, even if we don't have an opening. We're keeping a list of those folks. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, so one, always have a backup plan. Always have that person that okay, if so-and-so goes down, then I can bring this person in and fill in. We're structured that I have a general manager who basically helps me as an extension of myself. And then we have a project manager who is very knowledgeable. He bounces job to job. So there's been numerous times that he knows that if someone gets sick or if someone can't be at work for whatever reason, then he fills in. He fills in for that person, and then either myself or the general manager then will basically do what he's doing and go to jobs for the day. So that's a way that you can get behind on jobs a lot, and that's, for us, that's a big issue all the time, is completing jobs in a timely manner, because there's all kinds of external things that can happen. And if it's something that you haven't planned for, then it's just going to compound, and you're never going to get stuff done.
Gotcha. So how, if I'm a remodeler, how should I be recruiting? What are you seeing, or what's been your experience in the past? How do we approach recruiting? Is it where we're posting? Is it what we're posting? Talk about some of your best practices with that.
Some of it is where, but I think it is just, in marketing, they say that, always be marketing. And on the flip side, I think you always have to be recruiting. So if you're out and you see someone and you're just talking to someone about what you do, and that person's in the industry, maybe they're looking. Someone is always looking for something. So always be looking for the next person, whether it's posting ads, whether it's just out and about. Now, if you go back to ads, I use a combination of everything. Of course, Facebook. I post Facebook regularly. I keep a ton of resumes in the inbox that I haven't called them, but they're there and I can start calling them. So on the actual sites, what I have found is you get a lot from Facebook for my area. We get a lot from Facebook. Not sure that there's a whole lot of quality on Facebook from what I've found. There's numbers, but not necessarily quality. Indeed is sort of the same. Indeed is a little bit better quality, but you do get the numbers to make up for that. Now, I don't like the way that they just changed it and you have to pay different than what it was before, but that's just me.
Yeah, what's that change they made? I heard about that too.
Yeah, they went from you pay per candidate that you have interviewed instead of getting paid by clicks. So for what I'm talking about and what we're talking about here, having a group to call, it doesn't bode very well for that because you're paying for the one that you actually interview rather than having that group to call. But
gotcha.
And then I just tried ZipRecruiter again. I'd not tried ZipRecruiter since I started my own company, but actually it worked pretty well. I did that about 3 weeks ago, and I did get some pretty good applicants through that.
Okay. One thing I heard there, and that's what I found as well, is it's kind of a combination of everything. Or once somebody's like, well, I probably wouldn't post here. The next time I talk to a remodeler and they say, yeah, we just hired a new lead carpenter. I always ask, where did you find him? They fill in the blank with one that was like, haven't heard that one in a while. So that combination of everything, the consistency of it is something that we need to be very aware of. And then what about how we're presenting it? What do you do that makes it sound unique or that that really stands out and differentiates you? Anything that you have done or tried there?
For one, I'm always honest with the people when they come in. I will tell them exactly how it's going to be because one thing that I hear a lot through interviews I've heard in the past is, well, that person told me that it was going to be like this, and let's take working weekends as an example. Well, they said that I'd never be working weekends, but then I actually get to work, and so far they've made me work every weekend. I'm honest with the people. Be honest during the interview because if you're not and they come in, then something's different than what they're looking for, then you're just going to be recruiting again. That's one big one for me that I have found. And then, don't be afraid to cut someone out of the interview. If you're done with the interview, if 10 minutes into the interview that you're not going to hire the person, there's no point in keeping them around for 30 minutes. For one, you have more to do than interview someone that you're not going to hire.
Isn't a good fit.
Yeah. So, and I think it just goes back a lot to reading the people. And at this point, I have no idea how many people I've interviewed throughout my career, but it's probably, if it's not over 1,000, it's pushing it. So I think it's just the more you do it, the more you will see what you need to pick.
Gotcha. What's one of your favorite interview questions?
I always start with tell me about yourself. And my favorite interviews are the ones that I only have to ask that one question and it just flows from there. I'm not really a fan of the interviews where I have to start pulling those questions. I just want a conversation. I want to get to know the person. I want to find out what they've done in a conversation setting. I am not a fan of these canned questions because everybody prepares for them and everybody has the same answer. So it's something I just like a conversation and getting to know someone.
And it sounds like that fits with your culture. That fits with kind of how you guys roll. Excellent. So always be recruiting. My takeaway there is to continue to experiment and try different places to be posting. To have this mindset of, we can't wait until we need somebody to be recruiting. And then another thing that you wanted to mention was related to kind of budgeting for recruiting and making sure that we're spending some dollars on recruiting. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, we're coming up at the end of the year. Most people are probably getting prepared budget wise for the following year. Prepare for recruiting.
Hang on. Did you hear him? We are coming into the fourth quarter. Remodelers, you have 2023 happening. We should pull up our QuickBooks from last year and this year. We should review our current P&L, and we should think and create a business budget for 2023. Preach it, Jeff. But as you were saying.
Absolutely. You have
Okay.
to. But yeah, budget some for recruiting, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but do spend it just like marketing. With marketing, everybody should budget some for marketing and use it, because if you don't, then you're not getting anything out of it, what you're budgeted for. And recruiting is really the same way. Don't think of a recruiting budget as something that's going to be wasted if you don't hire someone. It's not, because one, just what I mentioned a little bit ago, the more you do interview, the more you know what to look for. And B, you never know when that one person who is going to be the star will walk through your door for an interview.
Hmm.
And if you're trying to save on that budget, then you're always going to be in that position where you do have to recruit out of necessity, and you're never going to be able to push the ceiling higher.
I like it. I like it. Cool. So those were our tips and tricks related to retention and recruiting. In the 4 or 5 minutes we have left, Jeff, you're running a remodeling business. You had talked a little bit in our back and forth earlier related to making sure your business is balanced. Making sure that we're just thinking. You just mentioned creating a business budget. What are you thinking about as a remodeling business owner as you're heading into the fourth quarter of this year, as you're thinking about next year? What's kind of got your attention and priority?
So I'm always I always worry about something. There's some days, and my business partner, he laughs, because some days I'll come in worried about not having enough jobs in the backlog, and I look at that daily most of the time. And then he'll laugh, because then the next day and we'll have a really good day and we'll get 3 or 4 jobs, and then he'll be like, yesterday you were worrying about not having enough jobs, and now you're worried about having the guys to actually do the work. So I'm always, it's always a balance. And where I came from, it was always leads push sales, and then sales pushes production. So I'm always in that mindset, and I'm always looking to make sure that I have if our backlog is running thin, then do I have enough leads to make up for it? And on the marketing side, I'm always looking to see, okay, well, if I'm closing say 50%, then I need X number of leads to get to here. So knowing your business is a big thing coming into the new year, and really seeing what worked last year, what didn't, where the budget stands. I know we're probably in the same boat as everybody. Our fuel cost this year is just shot. So, what's going to happen next year with that money? Am I going to have to up it? Is it going to be down? I'm always looking for different.
Gotcha.
areas.
So you're naturally, and your business partner laughed at you. You said of like you're always worrying about something. Well, that's your role. That's Jeff's role. He's thinking about what could go wrong, what could go right. So there's a balance there, of course. I liked how you phrased that of just what it's about. It's about knowing your business. Now we always talk about knowing your numbers, but just the fact that you said it's about knowing your business. What's working, what's not working. And it's going around the horn is what I call it. Sometimes I'll get on a coaching call with a client and not have anything specific to dig into. I just need to do a little bit of a spot check on things, and that's kind of what you're hitting at there of like knowing your business. Let's talk a little marketing. How have lead flow been? How many leads have we generated this year versus last year? Let's talk about sales a little bit. What's working, what's not working? Have we drifted away from some of our best practices when it comes to the sales process? Is there some follow-up? How's our sales pipeline? And just kind of going around the business of HR, of production, of financials and numbers and budgeting and job costing. Just really knowing your business. I like that phrase. And you said, oh yeah, you need to have a business budget. Tell the people to get on it. What does that mean, and why do they need to make sure they make time for that?
That's your roadmap. I mean, that's how you prepare for the next year, and that's how you know where you're going. Because if you're down, say for a quarter, all right, why are you down? And there's no way to really know that unless you have a budget. We started using a new software. I found it on the Facebook page, JobTread, and it really digs into the numbers too. And you have to know that, to know where you're going, to know where to take your business further ahead.
I like that. Excellent. So Jeff, we just did some just nice, solid conversation around topics that people need to be thinking about. Hopefully, they receive some takeaways. If you were to wrap us up by saying, "Hey, if you heard nothing else in what we were talking about, please remember this," or was there something you wanted to share that you didn't?
One, just know your business, know where your team is, know how everybody interacts with each other when you're not around. Because when you're around, it's going to be different. So know how they interact with each other when you're not around, and always be looking to see if there's a bad apple that is going to ruin what you have going. And then never hesitate to run the ad, even when that person's still there. Just a few months ago, we had a guy, I knew his attitude was poor. I ran the ad and I shared it on Facebook, and we were friends on Facebook. He saw it. He quit within 2 weeks. So sometimes that will push them out naturally too, but always know what's going on and try to have that finger on the pulse of your guys so you can recruit from that position of power rather than desperation.
I like that. I like that a lot. And I think my big takeaway is something that I heard you saying that I also vocalized, which is, of course, we talk about processes, systems, checklists, etc. But it's super interesting to me, as I've worked with a lot of remodelers over 15 years, that when you have not a great team, not a caring team, not a team that's trying to improve and get better, you try to put new processes and systems in front of them, and you might make a little bit of progress, but it's going to be pretty clunky. And then all of a sudden, over time and consistency and recruiting and working hard to build a stronger, better team, all of a sudden processes and systems, they're still important, but they're not as urgent and constant, because good people do good work and they follow a process, and you don't need to remind them 4,000 times. So continually, if you look at somebody in your market, or you see somebody in a remodelers community, or you see somebody that a remodeling company that you really respect, how do they've got that figured out? One, they know their business, they know their numbers, and they've worked really hard to build a team of really quality folks. And every single person listening to this needs to continue to work on improving and building up their team. The stronger your team is, the stronger your remodeling business is, and the easier it's going to be for you to step out of and wear so many hats as the owner. Cool. Mission accomplished, Jeff. We had a good Remodelers on the Rise show. Thank you for taking the time to do this and to prep for it. And everybody, we'll talk to you again next time. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.